Good evening, members of the town board, town attorney Joe Danko, clerk Baville, members of the public. Tonight, the Department of Public Works is proposing a water rate increase. We'd like to thank Phil Sapone with Rattellis. They've been our consultant for many years, tremendous help. Andy Donnelly and Stephen House with the Water Department, the Water Advisory Board, and all their input and help on this. And most importantly, Deputy Commissioner of Public Works, Brian Simmons. I'm going to step away now and let Brian take the lead. And I thank you very much for your time and your consideration into this matter.
Thank you, Commissioner. So Phil, I will let you start, and then Phil will turn it over to me.
Okay.
Phil, if you're driving the screen, could you actually do it as a slideshow?
Oh, yeah, sure. How's
Thank you.
that?
That's better.
Okay, all right. So my name is Philip Sapone. I'm from Rattellis. Our office is located just a couple hours north of you all in Albany, New York. And I'm here tonight to talk about a proposed water rate increase for 2023 and an update to our ongoing 5-year rate projections and rate plan. And just to share a little bit of background for everybody. So I presented I provided a similar presentation back in December 2022 to the town board, which reflected the town's plan for a water rate increase in 2023. And I believe that the Water Advisory Committee also presented its recommendation to the town board subsequent to that, and we were directed to go back and the town board directed us to go back and come to an agreement on a proposed increase between the town and the Water Advisory Committee for a proposed increase to 2023 water rates. So that's just a brief history here before I get started. And just wanted to start out by showing the proposed increase for 2023, which is 5%. And then we have planning level increases, which just means their projections at this point. Nothing's been finalized. We'll revisit the need to increase water rates if necessary in the future. But as of now, we're projecting planning level increases of 6% per year thereafter. But the percentage increases, just to be clear, so the town has a schedule of water rates. The percentage increase here represents the percentage increase we're proposing to adjust each of the different water rate components to get to the revenue that we need. And the increase here for 2023 would be effective for the second half of the fiscal year, which is also for the town on a calendar year. And each customer, for instance, a residential customer who might be billed quarterly, they will be subject to the adjusted rates for a 6-month period, regardless of how their billing cycle falls. So nobody will be the rates will not be applicable. The updated rates would not be applicable to any customer for a longer period than any other customer. Then after that,
No retroactive rate increase. It's for the future, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's for the future. Correct. Yeah, and the 6% increases, those assume that they would be effective as the first of the year, so January 1st, starting in 2024 and going forward. This slide's new. I believe the town board received a letter or a memo from the Water Advisory Committee talking about rate smoothing. And that's something that the town feels is important, and then the Water Advisory Committee agrees with and also feels is important. So what this graph is showing is two things. So you see the blue bars, those are the increases that we're proposing for 2023 and thereafter. That's represented by the bars here. The line represents the actual unsmoothed water rate increases that would be needed. And you can see for 2023, it would only be 2.7%. But as you go into the future and we have some capital projects that are going to be occurring in the future, we'll talk about those later. You can see the increase goes all the way up to 9.4%. And what we agreed is that it's better to keep the projected rate increases at a more level rate. So that's what we're doing. We're projecting the increases between 5 and 6%. So we don't have fluctuations in the increases in the future. And that way water rates are more predictable to customers. So hopefully that's clear to anybody, or that's clear to everybody. And I'll just pause for a second if anybody wants to ask a question on this, because I just want to make sure that that is clear to everybody. Okay. All right, so I'm just comparing the updated 5-year rate plan that we're discussing here tonight with the 5-year rate plan that we brought to the town board in December of 2021, when we were adopting and increased the water rates for 2022. So you can see that these are a little bit more, these were also smooth rates, but you can see the rate smoothing that we've done here to keep them at a kind of a more uniform annual increase is, we've done that to a greater extent with the updated plan. So that's what I'm trying to show on this slide here. And then just one note about this slide here, I just wanted to flip back to it. These two scenarios, the actual just-in-time increases and then the smoothed rate plan, they get to the same point in the end. It's just a matter of how you get there. These are the quarterly bill impacts. I'm just going to focus on 2023. So we have three different types of residential customers here. We just call them example users. And so we have a customer who used 9,000 gallons per quarter. And that customer would see an increase of $3.34 per quarter. And that's based on the proposed increase of 5% for 2023. Somebody using 15,000 gallons of water per quarter or 5,000 gallons of water per month, they would see a quarterly increase to their water bill of $5.85. And somebody that's using 26,000 gallons of water per quarter, so a little bit more than, I guess, 8,500 gallons per month, they'd see a quarterly increase to their bill of $10.96. So all I'm doing here, I'm just putting the percentage that we showed in the first slide of a 5% increase, just putting that in dollar terms for some example residential customers. This is a rate survey that we do, and the point of doing this is just to put the town of Greenburgh's rates, the water district rates, into context, as in what is everybody else charging for water rates, and how does that compare to what the town is currently charging? This slide is not justification to increase the water rates. It's not justification to not increase the water rates. It just provides context to the water district's water rates. And certainly there's a lot of factors that go into how much water costs in a given community. But you can see here we picked comparison utilities that are local to the area. So these names should be these communities should be very familiar to you. Several are part of the Westchester Joint Waterworks. Suez Water, that's an investor-owned or a private utility. They're oftentimes the cost of water or the cost for service is more expensive at investor-owned utilities. So that's why we're not surprised to see them up at the top of the list. But the town compares, and as we've seen the town compare in the past, compares pretty well. So its cost for water service is pretty competitive with other utilities in the local region. And I would also point out that many of these utilities also purchase water from the New York City water system, similar to the town. So this assumes sure, go ahead.
If you're done, when you're done with this slide, could you go back to the previous one?
Sure, I'm done now, so I'll flip back.
All right, so I just want to make it clear or find out whether or not you're proposing a difference. when we see $10.96 for the different users, up to 9,000 gallons, everyone pays the lowest rate, correct? And anything over 9,000 to 15,000, they pay that second rate, and then it's anything over the 15,000, you pay the 26. Or are you saying that if you're doing 26,000 gallons, you're paying $10.96 for every gallon, even starting with the first gallon?
So all I'm showing here is what I did is I calculated individual bills.
Right.
And so I'm saying based on the bills that I calculated using the town's existing water rates, then I recalculated those bills using the proposed water rates, which are going to be 5% more than what the existing rates are, because that's what we're talking about tonight. What I found is that if you increase the bill for a customer that's using 9,000 gallons currently, if you increase it by 5%, it's going to go up by $3.34 per quarter. So these are just the increase in the quarterly bill. They're not the unit rates per gallon.
Okay. But is it correct that everyone, when you're using up to $9,000, when you get to the unit rates, they pay the same amount? It's not, if you go over 26,000 gallons, you're not paying the high rate even for the first 5,000 gallons of water, correct?
Yeah. So I think you're referring to the tier rates. So the in-district quarterly rates. So up to 12,000, you pay the lowest rate, and then between 12,000 and 51,000, you pay $9.30 currently. And then greater than 51,000 per quarter, you pay the $11.06 per thousand.
And that tier is still staying in how it's calculated.
Correct. Yeah, we're not changing any of the tiers. Correct.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. That was a good question. I'm glad we could clarify that. And so this was, and that actually goes perfectly well with what I was going to talk about in the next slide. So this is a calculated bill based on 5,000 gallons per month. We just talked about the tiered rates for the town. So we wanted to see, as you move up through those tiers, or if you're a higher volume user, how does that affect the bill? So even when we assume a customer using 10,000 gallons of water per month, we see the town, as we work through those tiers, the town is still, the resulting water bill is still very competitive with the other, with the rates of other municipal water providers in the region. So just talking about the forecast, these are some key assumptions we make. So when we do the rate forecast, we have a Microsoft Excel workbook. It's a financial forecast and rate modeling template that I use, that Raftellus as a company uses for all the water utilities that it works with across the country. So we feed in expenses. We use the town's adopted fiscal year 2023 revenues and expenses. So we feed in the budget, and we project forward in future years based on the 2023 budget and some assumed escalation factors by the different expense types. Now, one change that we did make as compared to the forecast we made in December was the town got some clarity on the cost of some unexpected main breaks and repairs. So we added $690,000 in as a contingency for water main breaks and repair expenses. And then we bumped up that contingency to be $150,000 per year thereafter. And I believe Brian's going to talk a little bit more about that as we get into the capital plan section. Purchase water costs from New York City, we talked about that. It's a significant expense for the water district. And we looked at historical changes to purchase water costs. We looked at the New York City upstate rate report that provides a little preview of how the New York City system expects to change or increase their rates to upstate customers over the next couple of years. And we felt that a reasonable expectation was to project this cost to increase by 3 to 5% per year going forward. Other O&M expenses, that's your salaries, wages, benefits, supplies, materials, other repairs and maintenance, electric, chemicals, all that kind of thing. We projected those to go up by about 3 to 4% per year, which is about pretty typical of what we see in the industry. And the capital spend, it's significant for a water system of this size. It's 42 million and it ranges. So it's what we call lumpy from year to year. And it's 22 million that I think it's in 2025 or 2026. It's the pump station replacement project. That's kind of the highlight of the future capital plan. But we inputted the capital plan, and then we assigned funding to the different capital projects. So that all automatically flows through the model, and it's considered by the model when it calculates the necessary rate increases. Like I said, we funded with a mix of cash, existing bond proceeds, and new debt. And Brian, I think I was going to pause here and let you speak to these next few slides.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Brian Simmons, Deputy Commissioner of Public Works. For the purposes of the public, I'd like to just start and we can give a little background on the existing water system. So the Town Consolidated Water District was created in 1954. It serves approximately 40,000 people through 10,500 service connections. The Consolidated Water District receives all of its water from the New York City Catskill and Delaware aqueducts. The water pumped from the Catskill and Delaware aqueducts is treated and then distributed to the customers through approximately 190 miles of water distribution mains, ranging from 2 inches to 24 inches in diameter. In total, the system consists of over 190 miles of water mains, approximately 1,700 fire hydrants, over 3,000 valves, 2 pumping stations, and 6 water storage tanks. The water storage tanks you can see from there are the Glenville Elevated Water Storage Tank, which was built in 1995, the Knollwood Elevated Water Storage Tank built in 1928, the East Irvington Elevated Water Storage Tank built in 1977, Hartsdale Elevated Water Tank built in 1950, Fairview Elevated Water Tank built in 1925, and the Greenville Elevated Water Tank built in 1977. The daily average water pumped and treated into the distribution system in the year 2021 was 7.1 million gallons per day. Bill, if you could please go to the next slide. So just a little overview. The primary responsibilities of a water system are first and foremost to provide customers with plentiful supply of high quality water. The key word there, high quality, satisfy the peak demands and maintain the adequate pressure in the water system, especially for those to satisfy the fire flows. Now, before we get into the proposed capital projects, I would first like to provide a summary of the recent capital investments that have been made into the Greenberg water system. The first is the completion of the Rumbrook and Knollwood Pump Station interconnection project. The project was awarded in March of 2020 and was completed in the beginning of 2021. This was one of the most important upgrades to the Greenberg water system because it provided redundancy within that system to perform regular maintenance at both pump stations and to accommodate other improvements in the system.
Is that the Knollwood Pump Station? That's where the work is currently occurring near the old park, right?
No, that's this next project that I'm going to speak about. So in 2022, the new chemical feed station and contact tank project was awarded for a total amount of $16.9 million. And that is the construction that began in the fall of 2022. And as Supervisor Feiner just mentioned, that's the project that's taking place on Stadium Road, directly across from where the current pump station is at number 181 Knollwood Road.
Could you just give like a little more detail just about that current project, because I'm getting a lot of phone calls and emails just about that, and why it's so necessary and what the plans are in terms of all the construction activity, how long it's going to take.
So this project was, or the chemical feed station and a contact tank was needed in order to remain compliant with federal, state, and local water disinfection regulations. Unfortunately, New York City DEP ceased chlorination, and as a result of that, we had to install this contact tank. The contact tank is for the purposes of disinfecting the water that is pumped from those aqueducts before it then enters into our distribution system. So this project is currently under construction. The anticipated completion date is later this spring, early summer. So far, that project is progressing very well. And the contractor that is out there is doing a fantastic job so far. Another project that is currently underway is the rehabilitation of the Knollwood elevated water tank. This cylindrical tank was built in 1928 of riveted steel material and has a capacity of approximately 500,000 gallons of water. The tank is in need of repair, renovation, and painting. Phase 1 of this project will be completed later this spring. And then phase 2 will begin in the fall of 2023 and be complete by the spring of 2024. This is the tank that's located at the very end of Chelsea Road over in the Knollwood Mayfair Acres area. And this project has to be done in phases to coordinate the work with the peak demand seasons, especially those that come in the summer months. With that, before you now is the proposed capital improvements of the Consolidated Water District. As you can see, in 2023, the capital expenditures include $3,783,500 in water main replacement. This work will take place on various sections of the 190 miles of water mains, valves, and fire hydrants, many of which are more than 70 to 90 years old and are in need of upgrade. Specifically, the High Point Road and High Point Lane areas are some of those water mains within the system that are being considered for replacement to both increase the performance and mitigate any future water main breaks. In 2024, a significant investment will be made into the Fairview water tank, which is also a cylindrical tank made of riveted steel that was constructed in 1925 and has a capacity of approximately 400,000 gallons. This elevated water storage tank is in need of renovation and painting, and the approximate cost for this project is $8 million. In 2025, the proposed capital improvements include the replacement of the Knollwood pump station, which is the Consolidated Water District's primary source of water. The station was built in 1955 and then upgraded in the mid-1960s. It has 9 pumps that range in capacity. And unfortunately, the current infrastructure is very much aging, and that results in reduced pump efficiency, which makes it very difficult and costly to make repairs and to maintain these pumps and systems that are in place. So the total cost of this project is $22 million. In 2026, the capital expenditures include $3,500,000 in additional water main replacement, followed by an additional $3,500,000 in 2027 for additional work at that time, depending on the needs of the water district. The capital improvements that are outlined in this 5-year capital plan are necessary to meet both our short-term and the long-term needs of the water district, and to ensure that we continue to be able to provide high-quality drinking water to the residents and customers of the water district. And so with that, Phil, I'll turn it back over to you, and you can speak on the projected debt service costs.
Yeah, sure. Let me just move ahead here. Okay. So Brian was talking about capital projects. Typically, there can be different funding sources for the investments that the town may undertake for the water system. But one way to fund the capital projects is with debt service. And currently, the town is planning to pay for the pump station replacement project by borrowing money through a general obligation bond issue. So we included that into our forecast and into our projections. And you can see that what that does in the future. So for the years within the red box, is it bumps up the amount of debt service that the water district has to pay for the money that it's borrowed. And you can see debt service is projected to increase by over 77% from 2022 to 2027. And, going back to the beginning, the first slide I showed when I was talking about the proposed increases, and a natural question is, why are the water rates increasing? And, a really simple answer, but I think a good answer for that is, well, you have operational costs that we're projecting to increase by about 3 to 4% per year. Pretty typical. And there's significant capital projects that the town needs to undertake. And one of them is a $22 million project that the town plans to borrow money for. So the costs or the expenses that it's going to have to repay principal and interest on borrowed funds, on borrowed monies, that's going to go up quite a bit. So those are the two biggest drivers of the projected increases that we're seeing for water rates over the next few years. Okay. And this is the last slide I have here. It's kind of to sum everything up and kind of look at a high level view of things. So overall, for the water district, we're projecting moderate increases. A moderate increase of 5% in 2023, and still pretty moderate increases through 2024 through 2027 of 6%. I was taking part in a webinar this morning for AMWA, which is it's a water industry association, and Raftellus had worked with them to produce their biannual survey of things related to water rates and water finance. And one of the questions that we asked the utilities that responded, and there's about 200 of them, were how much do you expect to increase your water rates per year over the next 5 years? And the average answer that we got was about 5% from all the utilities that responded. So that's kind of a good barometer of what are utilities within the industry expecting to do with their water rates over the next 5 years. So you can see, even with the significant capital plan that the town has, these are still pretty moderate increases. And I think there's a lot of factors that go into that, but I think one of them is the town, working with Raftellus to say, what's the best way to pay for these capital projects? How can we do this in a way that minimizes the rate impact on customers? And I know the town recently completed an accounting of some previously issued bonds and the remaining proceeds from those bonds, and has been really good about using the remaining amounts to fund capital projects as it's for the water system as it's been able to. And that's certainly helped a lot. And then it's also been really good that we've been able to work together and look at some projections for the cash position of the water district. And when we feel like we have excess funds as far as cash, being smart about spending those down before the town moves ahead with borrowing money. So there's certainly no reason to borrow when you have the cash in the bank. This next one here is just the annual residential cost as a percentage of lowest income quintile. I know it's a mouthful, but it's just an affordability metric. And affordability is a really complex topic. And this is just a very simple measure, but what it shows is that water service is still very affordable in the town of Greenberg. Income quintiles we're splitting up the income segments into 5 separate segments. And we take the average income within the lowest 20%. We compare that to the cost of water service. Comes out between 1.6 to 1.8% of the average income of households within that bottom 20%. So this is a pretty good metric as far as others that I've seen. And the last two here, days cash on hand and debt service coverage, those are common financial metrics that water utilities look at. We set a target of 90 days for cash reserves. That just means we want to have at least 1/4 of the annual operating expenses of the water district as cash in the bank, just in case. And you can see with the increases that we're proposing above, we're able to do that. We're able to keep it above 90 days. So I think it ranges between 90 to 105 days. And then debt service coverage, we want to keep that above 100%. It's just a way of saying, are you generating sufficient funds from your water rates to pay back the money that you borrowed? If it goes below 100%, it just means that you're dipping into your reserves to pay back money you borrowed. Not a big deal for 1 year, and you see that in 2023, but it's certainly not a trend. And with the proposed planning level, I should say, not proposed, but planning level increases in 2024 through 2027, we're generating sufficient funds projected to generate sufficient funds to pay back money that we borrowed. And with that, I'll take any questions that anybody has.
I just wanted to mention that a couple months ago, there was a rate increase proposed, and the Water District Advisory Board, which is made up of residents, some who, basically have in the past had constructive criticisms. They recommended that we not approve the rate hike because they have some questions, but they have spent a few months reviewing the proposal, and now they're supportive of the rate hike. Requests, if we don't address the infrastructure needs, and if we don't have water, that would be a disaster for the town. So we have an obligation as a town government to make sure that we're able to supply our residents with safe, clean, healthy, and good tasting water. And I think the water department does a good job. And the Water District Advisory Board, made up of your neighbors, people from different sections of the town, they've been working very, very hard in terms of monitoring the water issues and the need to address infrastructure. Just the infrastructure that we recently, completed, connecting Rumbrook with Knollwood. That was a very, very expensive initiative. But if we hadn't done that and one of the pump stations went out of commission, there was no backup. Now we have backup. So, think how aggravated you are when you have a blackout from Con Ed. And you may be out for, a day, a week, or 2 weeks, or whatever, because we've had outages. Our job as the head of as commissioners of the Consolidated Water District is to make sure that you always have water, even if there's global warming and a problem.
If I could just make 2 points. I think there was always a meeting of the minds as to how much needed to be raised over the coming years. There was a difference of opinion between the Water Advisory Board and staff as to how to smooth that curve. And so now there's a meeting of minds of how to smooth the curve. In other words, not have a spike of 9% in 1 year. Your last point was what? Oh, was that?
He was talking about Rumbrook Tank.
Oh, and the interconnection, it's not just that you would be out of water. It's that there's a significant leak in the pump station that was there when I started on the board in 2006. And they couldn't shut off the valve to fix it because the valve is so old, you don't know. And at any time you do any kind of plumbing, by the way, get a licensed plumber. But whenever you do any kind of plumbing, that leads to another job, to another job, to another job. And we will now be able to shut off one pump station while we're running the water from one pump station to both locations, where before we couldn't do that. So this is what I consider to be the most significant infrastructure improvement that the town has had since they put in the water system in the first place. And just to be clear, the reason for some of the significant increases here is because of an unfunded mandate. Town didn't, ask for a contact tank, but the DEC has decided that they're not going to chlorinate the water. And so now it's our responsibility to do that. And we have to make sure that the chlorine is in contact with the water for a sufficient amount of time. And so we have to build this contact tank, the one you see on Norwood Road, in order so that there's contact time between the water coming up from the aqueduct and the chlorine itself. And so we didn't ask for it, but we're spending millions of dollars addressing it.
And, I should again highlight the fact that our rates are less expensive than rates in surrounding areas. I was looking at the chart just before. I live in the section of town that is served by Viola, formerly Suez. And our rates are according much higher.
Much higher.
So a lot of people where I live, would give anything to be part of the Greenberg, water, because so much cheaper. And our rates are still going to go up.
Yeah.
Rick?
So
Rich or Brian, was there anything that either of us said that's incorrect?
I do want to add, last week, the Norwood pump station was shut down and turned back on in the late evening, about 11 o'clock. And the connection was very successful. This was done to connect the contact tank to the existing pump station. So the interconnection project is working. It's actually changed the way they look at how they pump the water. It's actually shown that the other pump station is stronger than they thought. I was on site for a bit. I know Brian stayed there later than I did, but it was a successful night. And Andy Donnelly from the water shop actually felt that they could go later into the night and still supply adequate water. So it's been a success. I know everything you said is spot on.
I was going to ask you also, could you just for people watching this, people don't understand how expensive it is to repair a water main break. And could you just go over a little bit the cost of repairing some of these water main breaks and how old some of the underground pipes are? And, are we getting more water main breaks now than we used to have, or is it pretty consistent?
I think you have an aging infrastructure. We just had a major repair a few months back that was successfully completed. It ran through a valley up the side of a hill in the middle of the woods. And, the main is quite old and it was quite expensive to do it. Each job is different from time to time. We have a break right now that's been isolated on Ardsley Road. Unfortunately, our main now has another water purveyor's main on top of it. And we can't do the work until the school is out. We've been able to kind of cordon that area off so that it's not a problem now, but every day is different. Every break is like a fingerprint. They're all different. You don't know what you're going to head into, what situations you're going to have. I'm sorry?
Which was the Ardsley Road water main break repair?
We haven't finished that yet. We're going to wait till the school's out.
How much do you think it's going to cost?
Brian, do we have an estimate on that one?
So like Rich
PowerPoint
mentioned,
so we can
each-
see the speakers.
Yeah, that would be great.
Just take the PowerPoint down.
I wasn't sure who was controlling it.
Yeah, I'm just
So,
Well,
like Rich mentioned, each water main break is unique. Each one has different needs. So for these two water main breaks in particular that we had earlier this year, which were very large water main breaks, we actually had to bring in an outside contractor to help assist the water department. These water mains vary in size and depth. In some cases, they could only be 5 feet deep. And then in other cases, they could be upwards of 8, 9, 10 feet deep. And so for some of those deeper water mains, not that the town water department can't do these things, but it's easier, it's more efficient to have an outside contractor come in because they do this work every sort of day. They have the equipment to do these things. So in certain situations like those larger water main breaks, we will contract out some of that work to bring in a contractor. And also depending upon where the water main is, like Commissioner Fon said, if it's in the middle of the woods, getting access to those areas can be very challenging. Or in particular with this Ardsley Road water main, the challenge there is not only accessing it, but also the traffic control around that. And so it's just some of the things that are being considered are working on off hours, working when school isn't in session. Obviously, Ardsley Road is very heavily traveled, especially in the morning and during the evening rush hours. And so those are all things that we have to consider when talking about some of these projects. It's hard to give an exact number because you don't necessarily know, like the commissioner mentioned, there's a lot of utilities in Ardsley Road. There's other water mains. There's a gas main from Con Ed. There's drainage infrastructure that's there. So it can get very costly. But between those two water main breaks, that's where we came up with the estimate of the $690,000 between the one that we had earlier this year, which was right on Meadowview Drive, and the Ardsley Road water main.
And I will tell you, I got a text from Councilman Sheehan, lives far away from that break very early in the morning, that he had no water pressure in his house. That's actually how we knew there was a break somewhere. And one other thing I want to mention that is, I think, going to be very exciting moving forward. We were working with Phil and a colleague of his, and in the future we are going to, and we've been talked about this with the Water Advisory Board. We're going to be looking towards doing some best practices with the water department. Phil's colleague works with water systems throughout the country, and there's things that we could be doing to kind of stay on par with what we need to do. For instance, replace a certain amount of our water mains each year, valving. There's a lot that goes into these systems, and we are very lucky in the Northeast to have one of the freshest and cleaning drinking water in the world. And I say it all the time, the water department is the most important department in town. Not knocking any other department, but if you don't turn on your faucet and get clean, fresh drinking water, we got problems. Again, thank you for your time and your consideration.
Anybody from the public, Paul?
Anybody from the public want to speak?
We do not have any requests to speak on this public hearing.
Then I'd like to move that we close the hearing and leave the record open for 7 days.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next hearing